it's Stephanie. In today's video, I am going to talk about some recommendations if you don't know what to pick up for the Readathon. Now, I am sticking to books I have physical copies of because future Stephanie doesn't want to edit in pictures because I have a lot of stuff to film. So this isn't going to be an extensive list, but I do have at least 3 options for every prompt. So first prompt is to read a book by a female author. This is a book I am reading this month in September, but this is Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This is a graphic novel. You can also pick up Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, which I believe won a Shirley Jackson Award and is a book that is translated from Spanish. You can also pick up The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters. This would also fit for a book that is getting adapted, or a book that has an adaptation would also fit with this challenge. You can also read The Hunger by Alma Katsu, which is a retelling of the Donner Party. This is also getting a movie adaptation, so again, this could also fit with the adaptation challenge. You can even go a more classic, kind of subtle gothic route. I'm not picky. And you could read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Again, this also has an adaptation, so this could also fit with that challenge. Now moving on to some short story collections and anthologies. There is Night Shift by Stephen King. I also own Everything's Eventual. Only one Stephen King book per category that fits. And then I have 2 word horde anthologies on my shelves. I have Tales from a Talking Board, which is a short story collection where all of the stories are centered around a Ouija board, and Eternal Frankenstein, which is a book that came out on the 200th anniversary of Frankenstein. And as you can imagine, all of these short stories are centered around the Frankenstein novel by Mary Shelley. We Should Have Left Well Enough Alone by Ronald Malfi is another short story collection that you could pick up. I read this very recently on vacation and it was a lot of fun. The first story, I think it's called The Dinner Party, is like bonkers. My last 2 are a lot more classics of horror and literature. Okay, Books of Blood is mainly just like a horror classic, but Clive Barker is a big name in horror. He's also a gay man, so that could also fit another category. But this is the Books of Blood, which is one of the more famous short story collections in horror. A lot of the stories in here have also been adapted for film, including like Candyman, The Midnight Meat Train. This will be a good one. This is kind of a big one too, and this is only volumes 1 through 3, and there's like 6 Books of Blood. But you could pick this up. And for the most classic, you could go with my woman, Shirley Jackson. And this is The Lottery and Other Stories. I love this edition. Of course, The Lottery is such a classic short story, and I can attest that the rest of the short stories in here are amazing. I'm just going to quickly go through some books that have been mentioned on the podcast that were on my shelf. We have Ed Kurtz, The Rib from Which I Remake the World, which is going to be, I think, on an upcoming episode. I'm not sure when I'm going to post this, so this may or may not have been mentioned yet. There is Scream All Night by Derek Millman. This is a young adult book that was so wonderful if you want something that has some dark humor but is a little more on the heartwarming side. I would 100% recommend this one. I loved it so much. There is Harvest Home by Thomas Tryon. This is perfect for like the fall spooky Halloween season. It's great, and I love this cover, number 1. I know we mentioned this in our creepy small towns episode, but like Cornwall Coombe, creepy. And from our Canadian episode, there is also A God in the Shed by J.F. Dubois. This is just a crazy ride from start to finish. Now, for books that have been adapted, I've talked about a few in the other categories, but of course, The Shining by Stephen King. Also, there's a ton of Stephen King stuff that has been adapted. One of my favorites, Let the Right One In by John Adita Lindquist, which is a Swedish vampire story, and I will say the movie is amazing if you can find it. I think it's on Hulu right now. Kill Creek by Scott Thomas is a fantastic haunted house story set on Halloween with some horror writers, and this is getting adapted into a mini series on Showtime, so I'm very excited about that. You have the classic Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin, which I think you should definitely watch because it is one of my favorite just movies, not even horror, ever. And if you want another just thrill ride, I 100% recommend The Ruins by Scott Smith, and the movie is very enjoyable. There are some changes, but I'm okay with that. Also, I know I said I wasn't going to put any artwork on, but I don't think a lot of people outside of horror know that the Hellraiser franchise And Pinhead and all that is based off of a horror novella by Clive Barker called The Hellbound Heart. So if you want something short and you want to watch Hellraiser, you can do that. And last category is read something by a queer person or a person of color. A lot of the authors I have mentioned on here fit that, so a lot of these books there's overlap. One that might not necessarily be horror, a little more on the fantasy side, is Ghost Bride by Yangzi Chu. The Good House by Tananarive Due. I also recommend her short story collection Ghost Summer. It's amazing if you want that to fit in another category. And lastly, Octavia Butler wrote a vampire story. It's called Fledgling. It's a little more on the science fiction side, but I totally recommend it. Anyway, guys, those are my recommendations just off my shelves. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!